So what the fuck is AI? We see this word everywhere, we're hearing it everywhere, but for the most part we have no idea what's going on. So I'm here to clear that confusion up in as little time as I possibly can. So let's get to it, because no, not all AI is equal. AI is this thing that creates something from nothing, almost, right? It's all powered by this one thing at the core called an AI model. All we're really doing is sending a message, sending text or an image to a model that sits in this company's computers or whatever. So for the remainder of this video, an AI is going to be referenced as a model, because that's what it is, and a model will be represented as a box every so often, right? So important mention about these models is that by themselves do not remember anything, and they don't know how to use anything in the outside world. They don't even know how to search the internet alone, okay? Those are added to the model later. Let's differentiate these boxes. You have the LLM, the large language model, the ones that ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, and Meta, of course, they're all building LLMs, large language models. Those are the models that are very good at writing you essays, writing you emails, analyzing documents, etc., etc., etc. Now, there's also some models that have been embedded in them called image models, because no, a language model cannot create an image, and an image model cannot create language. So who the hell builds these models? We have some big companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. There's also Grok. There's Meta. They create big models, strong, expensive, but very smart models. Then they create cheaper ones that are faster, that are quality within themselves, but no, not as intelligent. They can't do as many complex tasks as the big boys. And the smaller ones are cheaper, larger ones are more expensive, but even more so than that, the larger ones are also slower. So every time you go into one of your models, you know you have a choice of models. You never know which one to choose. We're going to get to that in a second. There is a way to choose. But yes, so that's what these companies do. Now, obviously, OpenAI creates also image models. Google does the same. We'll get to that afterwards. So the builders are OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Grok. They are building the biggest models, the ones that are really advanced AI, the ones that are going to shape the world. Meta also does this, but you don't really have an application for Meta like you do for Perplexity, right? Or for Gemini, right? Meta does not have one of those apps. The only way for you to interact with it is over WhatsApp or Instagram. Great. China also has some big models coming out from the labs in China. DeepSeek, Qwen, Kimi, you may have heard of them in the news this week. Remember, there's conflicts with whether we trust them, the data. Do I want them to have my data? I don't use any of these models. I know a lot of my friends don't use them, but I have other friends that do use them. It's up to you. I think these frontier labs give us the best models in the world, slightly more expensive than the Chinese ones, but at least I know what's happening, more or less. And then in addition to the frontier models from the United States and the frontier models from China, there's a plethora of other models that are in a world called open source. You see these are a bunch of models here. I can go text models, like we said, LLMs, any-to-any, which is that multimodal, image to text, text to image. There's so many different types of models here, and everything that I'm showing you here is considered open source. I can click a model, and then I can use this model, and I can download this model. I can download this model to my computer and actually use it. This is an image model, as you can tell, right? So these are all custom trained by random people for you and me to download and use. Do we trust them? There's obviously you have to check security. Are they good? Not always, but it's at least enough for us not to start from scratch. Here we have NVIDIA create some pretty good ones for us to use as well. So that's the open source world. It allows people like you and me to actually use models without paying these big guys. But you know, there's grass is always greener on the other side. The models that are open source, I don't think there's any that are as good as the frontier models. No way. Maybe DeepSeek has a cheap an open source, but even if you were to be able to get your hands on one that's as good as one of these, like DeepSeek, not your computer, not my computer can run it. In order to run a model on your own computer, you need a very expensive computer, and that's why, you know, companies like NVIDIA thrive, which we'll get to in a second. They provide computers and chips that allow models to run. So, being that not everybody can run open source models on their computer, these providers allow us to run it through them and pay them for it, obviously. A quick rundown. We have the main labs here. Google creates language models, image models, video models, and multimodal models. OpenAI has language, image, and voice models. They stopped making video models. Claude, just language models, but in my opinion, the best of the best. And don't forget that language models are also coding models because coding is a language. Grok makes regular LLMs like chatbots. They make image models and video models that are very good. I think Gemini and Grok have the best search amongst these, but they're all good. And if I was to be coding, I would use Claude and ChatGPT. If I was to do a lot of social engineering work, searching what's going on the internet, I would use Grok and probably Gemini, because Grok can search Twitter and X, and Gemini is Google at the end of the day. But I highly advise everybody to use all models. But let's be real, the majority of us are talking to these models through apps. Even the ChatGPT app is not you directly talking to the model. You're talking to an application that talks to the model. And let's not forget that it also remembers everything about you. That's the ChatGPT application working overtime to make sure that it remembers everything about you, so that when it interacts with the model for you, it remembers everything. Like I said, even you, when you use ChatGPT or Claude, are not directly interacting with the model. You're actually interacting with some kind of application they built. Great. The apps that we use are paying providers to use their models. The models are actually running on chips called GPUs, like we said before. Not you or me can run these models at home, so we have to pay people to do them. A GPU is the brain of an AI. Without a GPU, you don't have AI as you know it. And that's why the concept of a data center comes up. Data centers just house a lot of GPUs. They have a shit ton of them. We use apps that use AI models that need GPUs that live inside of data centers. Okay, so now the question is, we are charged by how much we use NVIDIA GPU because we're charged for how much we use the models. How can we figure out how much we're actually costing? And well, very simple. GPU usage is charged by this thing called a token. The more tokens we use, the more GPU we're using, and the more electricity that the data center has to use, and therefore the more computers it has to use, the more they charge the labs, and the more the labs charge us. Okay, great. So tokens, what are they? The way that we get charged for AI, when we put something into an AI, it's actually being broken down into tokens, put into the AI of choice. The amount of tokens in is never as expensive as the amount of tokens out. It costs more to have a model put out a lot of tokens than to put in. Cheap models use less tokens, so they're less expensive. And the more tokens we use, we'll reach a quota. And if we use too many tokens, we'll get one of these, that the session limit was reached. Because when we pay ChatGPT a monthly membership to use their AI, we're technically paying them a monthly membership for a certain amount of tokens. So the real game here is, how do we use less tokens? How do we become more efficient with token usage? Because if tokens dictate how much I pay and how much I use AI, then I want to be good at using tokens. And that's where context comes into play. So the most important concept in AI is this thing called context. Context is very important. Context is how you manage the amount of tokens that go into a model every single time. The context window holds the entire conversation throughout the conversation. And every time I ask a question, it adds it to the context window. And keep in mind, all the tools that we're using, the ability to search Google, the ability to search your Google Gmail, the ability to interact with your CRM, those are all added to the context window as well. The context window is filling as we're having a conversation. And every time we ask a new question, it's using that new and improved context window, the bigger and bigger context window, to answer the next question. Second turn, it's filled up a little bit more with the files you added, your messages, the AI's messages. Before you know it, you're filled to the brim. And before you know it, you really don't have any more capacity and your AI starts becoming dumb. The context window it has a finite size. At the moment, the biggest ones reach 1 million tokens, which comes out to almost 1 million words. Because remember, without enough context, your AI is dumb, but with too much context, your AI is dumb. And when it processes all of that, it's actually costing you more because it's reusing tokens that it used before. So the thinner your window, the thinner your conversation, the cheaper it is, the less tokens you're using. Great. How do you take advantage of it? Either with a new chat, right? You ask the AI, hey, can you please compact this for me? And a good way to do that outside of memory is a thing called projects, where projects are just shared memory. Some other things to keep in mind when it comes to context is connecting it to the right tools. So some rules of thumb here. The fuller the context window, the dumber and the pricier it becomes. So your goal is to have the most empty window you can that has all the most relevant information that you can. So now we're talking about context and how to master it. We're going to rush through this, how to get better results with AI and how to save money with it. So, the one idea basically is managing context. The more context you use, the more you're paying. So you want to be able to get what you want with using less context. Remember, every message that you send resends everything before it, and they're still charging you for it. So, great. First move is find the right box. Okay? If it's a small, quick question, use a small box. Gemini Flash, ChatGPT Luna, Claude Haiku, they can do things for you with small boxes. And you can tell right here, the context window that I'm using is about 176,000, which is about 18% of the entire context window. If you look now, after the compaction, I'm down to 17,000, which is 2%. But what makes it really an agent? It's not just that it has the tools in the hands and the brain to think, but that it can see, that it has access to the data that you want. Basically, once these boxes get up their brain, which is just the model you choose, eyes, and you plug them into your data, you give it the ability to see your Gmails, the ability to see your CRM and all your clients. Then you give it hands, the ability to send emails, the ability to reach out to leads, collect leads, scrape the internet, search things for you. Once you've given it eyes, hands, and a brain, now all you need to do is give it a job. And once you give it a job to do with these arms, hands, and brains that you just gave it, now it's becoming automated. Can you please scrape all the non-contacted leads from today and send them a message? It's going to use the eyes that I gave it to look into my CRM and look for all the leads that came in yesterday. Then it's going to use the email writer for all of these different leads. That's called a workflow, an automated workflow. Claude created this thing called a skill. I highly advise you Google this. After you connect tools to your AI of choice, so here I'm inside of the Claude app, I'm inside of settings, I went to connectors. My Claude is connected to DocuSign, it's connected to my Gmail, my calendar, my Drive, my AI conversation tracker, my project management tool, my other project management tool, Slack, and my to-do. So when I ask Claude or my AI to do things for me, it can do all of these things for me. And when I give it a organized job to do, which is just called a Claude skill, it's a packaged workflow, it knows how to do many, many things for me. And then when you give an AI a bunch of different workflows, a bunch of different instructions to do, then you give it the ability to choose which instruction to do when, based on what it sees on its own, a little employee or a little intern. That's when a workflow becomes an agent. It's now an agent that has a very, very finite goal and skills that know how to reuse its tools to actually reach that goal. Agents know how to pick which tools, which things need to get done in order to reach the goal all on its own. So that's it. If you look at the whole story, on the basis we have chips that power NVIDIA GPUs, data centers that house all the boxes, OpenAI, Meta, Google, and the rest of them. They use tokens in order to get powered. The more tokens we use, the more context we use. And we get introduced to that context when we're chatting. Longer chats, more context, dumber responses. Great. Outside of just chatting with apps, we also have apps that use models. And the apps let us do even more with these models. And once you do even more with these models, you realize, oh, I can actually now have these models do workflows for me. They can remember how to do things from A to Z, and they can reach a goal for me. And once I can have a few of those, I can package a bunch of these workflows into agents, and agents can start working for me. And I advise everybody to focus on learning this part quickly, deeply, YouTube, and then you can start understanding how agents work. So that's it. Appreciate the time. Great. Any questions in the comments? I'll try to respond to them all.